Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Achen, the founder of ChopLocal. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at ChopLocalUniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of our ChopLocal podcast. In full transparency, we are recording this podcast before we have even named it. So by the time that this gets published and you are listening to it, we should have a real catchy name to go along with the podcast. But I am Katie Olthoff. I am one of the founders, co-founder of ChopLocal and ChopLocal University. And I'm going to be hosting this podcast for you. And in this podcast, we are going to be interviewing farmers, butcher shops, and industry experts all about selling meat direct to consumer. But to kick it off today, I am joined here with my business partner, Jared Achen, who deserves all the credit for coming up with the idea for ChopLocal in the beginning. So, welcome, Jared, to our podcast.
I'm glad to be here because we've been talking about doing this, I think, since we founded the company, and it's always been in the back of our minds. So it's really exciting to actually launch this thing and tell our farmers, our butcher shop stories, as well as educate, vendors and other people that are selling direct consumer on what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about how ChopLocal got started, but I think you're right. I think it was one of our initial conversations that you and I had. We were like, we should do a podcast, and we were both really excited about the idea. That was over 4 years ago, probably 4.5 years ago almost.
Yep.
And it's taken us a while to get to this point, but I'm really excited also that we're finally kicking it off. So why don't you start out by telling everybody kind of how you came up with the idea for ChopLocal?
Well, I knew you were going to ask this question, obviously, and I don't know. Do you want me to start how I came up with ChopLocal, or do you want me to start at the beginning of my life when I was born and then work from there forward?
Oh, let's just hear the whole thing, Jared. When you were born and what you dreamed of doing and everything.
Well, I always dreamed of farming, that's for sure. So, but yeah, I think, how I came up with ChopLocal, some of my backstory is probably somewhat important in that. And so I grew up on a livestock turkey farm here in southeast Iowa. I'm from Wayland, Iowa, and grew up on turkey farm, grain, row crop, corn and soybeans. So I went to Iowa State and majored in agricultural business, and from there I came back to the family farm, built my own turkey sheds here and ran my own operation as well as managed my dad's operation. From there I got involved in some of the egg businesses that my dad had started, one of them being our feed mill. We built a feed mill down here. We wanted quality feed. There's about 20 turkey growers at the time in this area. We wanted our own quality feed, and my dad got the growers together, and we bought our own feed mill so that we can control that quality. Involved in that as the board president, and also now serving as the general manager to a certain extent. And also then Wesley Foods, and this is a little bit of a bigger story, but my dad in 1996 got together with some turkey growers. The Lewis Rich turkey plant was going to close down, and that's where a lot of the turkeys in Iowa went to, especially in our area. That's where majority of the turkeys went to. And so they knew they had to do something. That plant was going to close down. So here again, they got turkey growers together. I think there was 40 of them at the initial start in 1996, and purchased the plant. That really allowed them to control their own destiny, and Wesley Foods has grown into a pretty successful company, grown into a further processing company of meats. My dad's still on the executive board there. My brother serves as CEO, so not necessarily involved in that from a day-to-day operation, but I'm a part of that organization that allows me insights into the meat processing industry and further processing of meat industry. So from there, 2020 hit. Everybody knows what happens in 2020, COVID. We saw, the market be really disrupted in the meat industry. We had store shelves that were empty. We had producers with meat or animals that they couldn't get processed, harvested to get onto the meat shelf. So while our meat system in the U.S. is very efficient and it's just not as resilient, and part of that's because we've lost so many of these small processors and farmers, having that direct connection to the consumer. And I really started to look at, how do we get farmers to the market? How do we allow them access directly to that market, which is really important, not only for the farmer but for the consumer. Consumers are really wanting that transparency, and how do we align them? And for the farmer's standpoint, how do we allow them to get better margin? You've got to get to the market to get better margin, and not just be dealing in the wholesale market. So really started thinking about it, and I came up with the idea of a marketplace similar to Etsy, similar to Amazon, where you've got sellers, maybe farmers, butcher shops on the platform, and they're connecting directly with that consumer and selling their meat direct to them. So in May of 2020, launched into that. Katie came on board in November of 2020, and we actually launched and made the platform live. So that's my story in a nutshell. I probably left a few parts out. Katie's heard this story a million times, so she might be able to fill in where I've missed it. But
Yeah, I gotta share. I gotta share some of my favorite parts of the story. Because people always like when we're out talking to people, people love the name Chop Local. Do you remember how you came up with that, or was it just in a brainstorming type of a deal?
I've got to give my wife Tanya some credit. I'm pretty sure she came up with the name, or we were discussing the name, and somehow that name came out. We were thinking about like shop local. That always comes up. You need to shop local, and in when I was laying this out, I didn't want to narrow myself down into the meat with the name. I didn't want to have like your meat market or something like that, your local meat markets, because I didn't want to narrow down meats. I wanted to leave it open so that, in the future we could maybe add produce or something like that where other farmers in other industries are selling local. So that's really how it came up. Is like we're gonna chop because you can chop lettuce, you can chop produce, you can chop meat, obviously, and have the name local. And that's really what we wanted to bring to the table was this local connection that you would have with your butcher shop or farmer, like you did, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I love it. I've said before, and I maintain that if you had named it something boring,
Yeah.
like your local meat marketplace or something like that, I don't think I would have been nearly as excited when I first heard about it. So I love the name Chop Local.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I still own the domain of your local meat market or something like that because that was one of them, I think.
Well, you have a collection of domains, I'm
Yes.
pretty sure.
Yeah.
Anytime Jared gets a business idea, he goes and buys the domain and just sits on it so that he has
Luckily,
that
Go
ready when he's
Luckily
when he
GoDaddy
needs it.
sells cheap domains, so that allows me to hoard them.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, Jared came up with the idea. Tanya, his wife, super creative. I'm sure that she did help you with the name. The other thing that happened really well, a couple of things that happened really early in the process is you made a logo for Chop Local. Do you want to tell everybody how you made that logo?
Oh man, this is actually really funny because I'll tell them and then I'll tell them the story because I made the logo in Microsoft Word. Very familiar with the Microsoft suites. My background is somewhat business and finance, so I love Excel, love working in Excel. So the Microsoft suite is what I'm accustomed to. I didn't know how to make any design software work, and I didn't want to learn it. So Microsoft does have some nice features to make some stuff if you're really patient. And so I created the Chop Local logo in Microsoft Word.
Well, I was just going to say, and then you screenshotted it and saved it as an image.
Yep.
And then we do not have the original, we don't even have the original Microsoft Word document to know what font you used or to grab the hex colors.
I
We just
forgot
have a
about that. I don't know how that
screenshot.
got lost. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's somewhere in the
Yep.
abyss.
So we actually had to take that screenshot, send it to a graphic designer, and have her clean it up in Photoshop or Illustrator or something like that so we could get a higher quality,
Oh
image
yeah.
there to use as our logo. What was the
Yes.
rest of the story you were going to tell about it?
No, I was trying to create a design for another project I'm working on, and so I started to try to teach myself Canva, which Canva is obviously user friendly, but I just got frustrated because I tried to get everything done in like an hour and it wasn't working. So popped open Word and started doing my graphic design in Word again. And I'm like,
Please do not.
Yeah, I was like, Katie's. No, I'm not going to send this one to Katie because she's going to get mad at me. So
My eyes at you.
yeah,
For
exactly.
seriously.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
ask for help. So
Yeah, so okay, so if you're listening and you don't know us, Jared has the business background, and my background is more in communications, marketing, more graphic design, creative visual type things. And so we say Jared does numbers, Katie does more of the marketing side of it. Um, the way that we met, well, so let me back up too. So my husband raises turkeys similar to Jared, although we are in a different part of the state. We are also part of West Liberty Foods, the farmer-owned cooperative. And so Jared and I knew each other like had I had worked for the Iowa Turkey Federation. We had maybe been to a couple meetings together, but I don't think we'd ever talked or anything. I think I asked you for photos once when I worked at the Turkey Federation and that kind of thing.
yeah.
But before the pandemic, I was working for the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. And again, when we saw all of these people with fat cattle ready to send to market and nowhere to send them, we hosted a webinar all about selling beef direct to consumer. And so I helped organize that webinar and was helping run it one night in, I think it was June of 2020. And somebody popped on as a viewer. It was Jared Achen. And I was like, Jared doesn't have beef. He doesn't have cattle. What in the world is going on? So I sent him a message via Facebook and said, "What are you doing on this webinar?" And he said, "I'm creating ChopLocal." And he told me about it and I fell in love with the idea. I even like sent a text to my boss at the time and was like, "Look at how cool this is going to be." I told him I was when he was ready for help with marketing, I wanted to help. Um, and he said, "Yep, they're going to get started in the next couple of months, hoping to launch, I think in August is what you said."
Yeah, that
So
sounds right.
mid August, I remember I had a work event and I decided that I was kind of ready for a change from my job. And I reached out to Jared after that and said, "Chop Local hasn't launched. What are you doing?" And he was like, "No, we haven't launched." But that started our conversations about me kind of joining full time. So Jared, do you want to tell the story about how you'd been to the pork producers meeting that day and how it all
Yeah,
just kind of happened all at once?
yeah, it did. It was an interesting the day that Katie picked to message me about she was pretty blunt about it. Which, if you get to know Katie, this is like typical Katie. But she basically messaged me as like, "Hey, can you give me a job because I want to help you launch this thing?" But
Yeah, that
anyway,
is pretty much
yeah,
how it went.
it it was ironic because that day I was up at a Iowa Pork Producers event, and my dad asked me to come. West Liberty Foods was going to talk to some pork producers and discuss with them about how they got the cooperative together and got it launched. Because at the time, I mean, there was just a lot of turmoil in the markets, and everybody was looking for options. So we went up to that meeting. My dad invited me along, given this idea that I had of Chop Local, and I pitched the idea to the Iowa pork producers. Obviously there is some people, or there's a lot of people in the Iowa pork that is larger thinking, larger processors, more commercial processors. Obviously, Chop Local does not align exactly with what they wanted to do, but they do have some niche producers in Iowa pork, and I can't remember the girl's name, but she came up. She's like, "Hey, we have this niche pork account that we could, give out this money into, and this is absolutely what we need for those pork producers." And so she's like, "I'd love to give you this grant to help you get started." And that was the initial money, actually, I think, to launch Chop Local. But came home from that event, and it was really hot that day. And if you don't know anything about taking care of turkeys, they hate heat. And I was dealing with a lot of challenges once I got back from this event. And the whole time I was driving back from this event, I was thinking about, do I launch this? Do I have the time? I'm not an expert at marketing. That's where I needed a decent partner that had complementary skills of mine. And it wasn't, I think, 6 p.m. that evening. Katie texted me, probably on her way home from work or something. She's like, hey, have you launched this thing? Because I'd like to come to work for you. And I'm like, huh, that's ironic. Got money for it today. Having a hell of a time on my farm. And somebody that knows marketing, which is what I was going to need to launch this thing, just texted me and said she wanted a job. So
And the
that
rest
was
is
it. I
history.
think I was like, we're doing it. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny because in like ag businesses and especially in the startup world, they say to choose your co-founder really carefully. You know, you guys will be practically married to each other for years. And Jared, like, we hardly knew each other at all. Like, really, truly didn't know each other at
no, I
all.
think that was the
And
third time maybe I've talked to you.
yeah, yeah. And it's worked out really well because we do have really complementary skill sets, I think, is a huge part of it. And I don't know. I guess it's just worked out really well. I guess we've been lucky. I do tell people because we don't live close to each other. We're about 3 hours apart. We talk a lot on the phone. And I do joke that, like, if we had to be in an office together all the time, I don't know that it would be the same,
Probably wouldn't
same
have the
type of
same
thing.
relationship.
Yeah, we did have to. We've traveled together a couple of times, and you can just tell it's a little bit different when we're face to face, especially when you're traveling together and you're like, in the slog of being at the airport or away from home and that type of thing. But yeah, it's gone really well. And then we have currently on our team, we have Sydney, who's in Central Iowa with me, who we need to get on the podcast because we've talked about her in I talk about her in some of the episodes, and she's just such an integral part of working directly with our farmers and butcher shops. And then really excited that we just hired a new marketing specialist named Sierra and cannot wait to really get her really get her boots on the ground and get her really involved. And I think that that's going to be a great addition to our little team as well. So, okay, Jared. So there's a couple other things we want to cover on this podcast. I do think we should give kind of a little bit of an overview. I can do this part about like how ChopLocal works. Jared mentioned ChopLocal is like Etsy, but for meat. If you're not familiar with Etsy, which a lot of farmers are not, it's like a farmer's market that is online. So each farmer or butcher shop gets their own booth. We call it a micro store. And it's a landing page that's all about their farm or butcher shop, has all of their products on there. So they can send their customers right there to their farmer's market booth or their micro store. Then at the same time at ChopLocal.com at the homepage, we're doing marketing to bring in new customers. Those customers can put in their zip code, find farmers or butcher shops in their region. They can also search if they're looking for a niche product or they're looking for Wagyu or they're looking for Mangalitsa or grass finished or whatever it might be. They can search for those products and find somebody that's closest to them that can ship their meat to them. Our farmers ship their meat, but they also do local pickup for their local customers, and it ranges. It's a 60-40 split or 50-50 split, kind of right in there. It's different for different farms and different butcher shops depending on their business model, but they have both of those options, and we really do try to incentivize people to buy from within their region. Our goal we've always talked about is that anybody can find local meat that was raised or cut in their part of the United States, in their region, in their state, or within a 100-mile radius of them on ChopLocal. And we've been growing that out over the past 4 years, figuring out what kind of vendors are just right for that, and then growing that footprint. I think right now as we're recording, we're in 28 different states. And so honestly, that hits a huge part of the United States, which is something that we're really proud of. So, Jared, you have ordered a lot of meat. So we raise turkeys, but we also raise beef cattle on our farm. So we raise our own beef. But Jared, you don't raise beef or pork, and so you've ordered a lot of meat from our ChopLocal vendors. What
Yeah.
has that experience been like?
Well, I'm pretty sure that for the first 5 vendors, I was quality control, or maybe even 10, because I think every time one would come on, I'd order meat from them and see how it was and how they did the pack, help them critique how they were shipping and stuff to make sure they were getting stuff packed right. But yeah, I love trying out everybody's different products. So
Yeah, as we've gotten vendors, farmers, and butcher shops from farther away, it's been harder for you to order from all
yeah,
of them. But
yeah,
I know we were just talking about you bought a bunch of meat for holiday gift boxes for your
yep,
employees and your friends and family. And Sydney and I work more directly with our producers than you do, so we were kind of coaching you through, okay, this guy is new, but he has really, really great reviews and is doing a ton of sales right off the bat. We think that you should try from this farm. But then, of course, you've got a few of your favorites that you've developed
yeah.
over the last few years too, because they just have amazing quality meat as well.
Yeah,
So,
it's just, I mean, every time I order from my vendor, I just remind myself of why, I decided to take the risk and launch this company, because the quality that you can get from these farmers, these butcher shops, is just tremendous. And I know there's a lot of people out there that say, yeah, you can get the same thing from the grocery store, but it's really the quality and it's the story behind the quality that's great. I mean, I keep telling people, when you pair really good genetics with really good farmer that knows how to feed that animal properly, and then you add on a butcher that knows how to break down that animal and do a really good job butchering that animal, I mean, you just can't beat that. I mean, it's just craftsmanship all the way through, and that's really what you're getting on our platform, and there's just a huge difference. So
you're giving me goosebumps. And like the value added products too. Some of those, like the brats and the sticks and the
yeah, I'm
those
a
things are
big
so
stick
amazing too.
connoisseur, so I always get a package of sticks whenever I'm ordering, and they're awesome.
Yeah, so we could tell you, I mean, we're not going to pick favorites on the podcast here, but we can tell you some of our favorite farmers, at least here in the Midwest, where we're based. We can also tell you some of our favorite processors too, and our small processors just do an amazing job. So,
Yeah, they do.
okay. All right, Jared. I said I didn't want to make this like too dry of a podcast episode where we just talk about Chop Local. So I kind of warned Jared that I was going to do this, but I didn't tell him what exactly we were going to talk about.
And this is the part that I'm nervous
After This is
about.
the part you're nervous about. Okay. After 4.5 years and countless phone conversations, lots and lots of phone calls and talking on the phone, I have learned some of Jared's business philosophies that I think I've learned them at least. Like this is the way I've interpreted them. And there's some that aren't appropriate to share on the podcast, I will say.
No,
No.
going, yeah, that there's
Okay.
probably a few that shouldn't be shared.
Yeah. So, but I am going to share a few of the business beliefs that Jared holds near and dear to his heart, I think. And he's going to tell me if I've interpreted them correctly, or if I'm way off base here. So,
I want to give a disclaimer first, because it's not like I'm extremely successful at any business yet. So like, these are all to be taken with a grain of salt. I always tell people it's like that. I think it's a State Farm commercial where it's like, I know a few things because I've seen a few things, and that's basically basically my business, how I view business. So
okay. All right. So I'm going to flip up. Now that you just said that, I'm going to reverse the order of some of these now. Okay. All right. One of them is that I think we've talked a lot about the importance of like having good mentors, but also good business role models. And you already mentioned like your dad was involved in so many businesses. Your brother is the CEO of West Liberty. Like when you guys are together, you are talking business all the time. And it might be the feed mill, it might be the farms, it might be West Liberty, it might be Chop Local, but like that is just like part of the fabric of your family. So I guess the question is, do you agree that having good mentors and business role models is important?
yeah, absolutely, 100%. And you hit that spot on. I think one time we talked is like, you know, you can give people a lot of things, but the fact that my family is very entrepreneurial, and and understands business and has built businesses and grown businesses, puts me a step ahead of other people because I have those people surrounding me. I grew up with those people. So, I think it's a huge advantage. Even, you go back a few generations. I mean, even my grandpa on both sides, my grandpa Achen had his own farming operation, and then actually moved into running a cooperative system. On my mom's side, her dad was very entrepreneurial in the turkey industry and a lot of different industries. My uncle, same way. I grain farm with my uncle, and I ask him a lot of questions, and I'm just with him all the time when we talk business, and so I get to pick up on those things. And here again, it's like not that I'm an expert at running a business, and some people maybe disagree that I even know what I'm doing at all, but just the fact that I've surrounded myself with so many people. And my philosophy has always been like, I'm really not that smart. I just look at somebody that's been successful and I try to study what they've done, and then just try to take, what they've done in their life and take that over into my life and try to emulate the same thing. So.
Okay, so the next one, I do think that aligns with what, back up. I do think that aligns with what we've discussed before. And we've talked about how for some people in rural areas, especially, like they might have really great ideas, but if they don't have that network of mentors or business advisors or people that they can look to, they might not have any idea how to turn that great idea into a business, if you will. And that's something where you alluded to, you can put people in classes and give them education and stuff like that, but the things that you've learned by just being immersed in this entrepreneurial mindset, and probably I don't know if you mentioned this, but seen a few failures along the way with some successes too, like that's something that's hard to replicate, and that's something that I know you feel fortunate to have experienced.
No, absolutely. So. Yeah. And back to that failure piece, I think that's really I've been out of college now 14 years, and I just feel like I've seen a lot of things happen. We've had a lot of failures, in the fact that I'm spread across a few different businesses that I get to see and involved in. They've each had their different failures, and being able to be involved in all those and see what went wrong and what we didn't do right and how we changed and pivoted and moved forward. That's very influential, and having all these experiences that I've had in the 14 years is probably why at 35, I probably feel like I have a 45-year-old education, because I've had a lot of things happen in the last 14 years. So.
Yeah. Okay, this next one we've talked about, and I honestly don't know where you stand on this. I don't know what you're going to say when I bring up this topic.
You're going to start talking politics, Katie, or what?
No, we're not going to talk politics. Although you and I have spent a lot of time. You know what? I do tell that story sometimes. Like the week that we launched ChopLocal was election 2020, right? Yeah. We were so busy launching ChopLocal that like I could barely pay attention to the election. And then I remember January 6th of 21, you and I were in like a serious, deep, several hour long planning meeting. And I remember getting off the meeting and being like, oh my gosh, look at the news. We missed it all because we were busy. But you know what? That can be a good thing. Just keep us busy
that's
instead.
Right. Yeah.
So, no, the one that I was going to see what you say about is consultants. The value of consultants. And I have heard you go both ways, because you just talked a lot about the value of, the mentors or being around those people that have been there, done that, which in some ways a consultant is. In a lot of ways, ChopLocal and ChopLocal University serve as consultants or experts for our vendors. But at the same time, you've also said that sometimes consultants, you feel like, don't do a lot for the money that they make. Putting you on the spot.
I knew this question was going to come too. So I do have a very strong opinion about consultants, and I think where the consulting breaks the line is like, are you hiring this person to do something in your business, and you're expecting, what are the expectations of the consultant? And I think that's where it comes to, and maybe that's where it's failed for, me in the past of hiring consultants. But what I always hate, I mean, what it really goes down to is consultants don't have skin in the game. I've always said if we are getting close to needing a consultant and we're talking to them all the time, we need to have a full time employee. That full time employee can be on our payroll. Their skin's in the game. The decisions they make on a daily basis, that's going to reflect how the company moves forward. And right or wrong, but they're in it. They're in it every day and they're working on it. We've had so many consultants in the past that they come up and they give you advice, and a lot of the times when you get done paying those guys 30, 40, $100,000, they basically outlined everything that you already knew, but you weren't very good at executing on it. And they didn't help execute it on it either. They just told you what your problems were. And that's where I've always struggled with consultants is like, we pay you all this money, and we don't get any execution. And that's where, an employee's different. They've got the ideas, they've got the strategies, but they can also execute it, and their skin's in the game. So, and that's where I switch over to a consultant that's more of a mentor or more of a leader in your life. And we've got some of these that we really like. Dan Shipton, has helped us out on the software development side, on the IT side of things. And I view him as a very good consultant. And it's those people that have a deep understanding of the industry and they ask really good questions, and they also help you execute, to a certain extent, or help you really know where you need to refine your time to make sure that you're not wasting your time. So I don't know if I answered that really well, but that's, there's probably a blurred line, but that's kind of where you can see that I can tell some stories about why consultants don't work that I've dealt with, but I don't want to call anybody out. And on the other hand, there's some people that have mentored us and mentored me in my life that it's worked. And
Yeah.
I want to say something too is like typically those consultants actually don't even charge you for their time.
Right.
They're successful enough that they just want to pass down knowledge, and they're looking for somebody that's willing to take that knowledge and apply it in their own life. Consultants also hate, like, on the other hand, there's a lot of people that ask me for advice in certain scenarios, and it's like, I hate when you hand out advice and then they're like, yeah, I'm not taking that advice, and they're just not willing to listen either. So
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things there. Like when we talk a lot about like who are our ideal chop local vendors, and one of those attributes that we're looking for in them is that not that they'll just take our advice and follow it, word for word all the time, but if
no,
they are
exactly.
willing to seek out advice and they are continuing to try to make their businesses better, like those are the types of people that we love to work with because there's something about that drive to make things continually better that makes their meat better, makes their farm practices better, it makes their customer service better. Like it just carries over, and we really like that. Um, the other thing about consultants, and this is a generalization that I believe, and I think you'll agree with, but like really general consultants, like on marketing, they typically don't add a lot of value. I would say that with a grain of salt. But when I talk to people, like you said, a lot of times it's my industry friends that don't even charge me for anything.
Yep,
But when I talk
exactly.
to people that know meat marketing, or they really know social media, or they really know SEO, or like I've got one gal in mind who works with food bloggers, so she really knows how to make food go viral or be really popular on social media. Like when I think about her, she's got that really specific niche knowledge that does add a lot of value to what we're doing. And because we can't necessarily afford to hire somebody that is an expert in this one little niche, this one little field, if we can find a consultant who is narrowed in like that, then that typically does add a lot of value to us, I think.
Absolutely, and that's what I see too. Is like we had a problem at the feed mill, or we were trying to solve a problem uh, in an area of the feed mill, and like, yeah, you could have hired a consultant. Not that we were going to, but you can also pick up the phone and call people in the industry that I've met at Iowa Turkey Federation meetings, or different meetings, different networking advice, people that I've made connections with, and just pick up the phone and be like, hey, how'd you deal with this? Or hey, can you send me some numbers on this? And that's where you really need that network and that group of support, that other people that have been in the trenches that are dealing with the same things that you've dealt with.
And that's what I love about Chop Local. Like, I love to work with our producers. Like that was my favorite thing at my last job at the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. And it's one of my favorite things now is I just love to get to know our producers and our butcher shops. And when one of them has a problem, Sydney or I typically know who else is in a similar situation that we can either go and ask advice to, or we've already talked to that person and we can say, well, you know, Fluffy Butt Farms handles their inventory this way, so you might try this. But West 40 handles their inventory this way, so you might try that instead. And that network is just so huge.
Yep.
Related to that a little bit, another one of Jared's business beliefs is that this is really related to ag startups, I would say.
Oh
Okay,
boy, we're going
so
there.
new companies in agriculture with new ag tech, that type of a thing. We've seen some companies who, maybe the founder has a tech background or, maybe they have a business background, but they don't necessarily know agriculture in and out the way that a farmer who works it every day does. And so, one of the things that I've heard you say repeatedly is that those businesses really need to have a subject matter expert. They need to have someone who understands the problem. And that is a huge differentiator for some of these ag businesses that do really well versus the ones that don't necessarily.
Yeah, just a little bit of background. I do some angel investing. I mean, I'm really interested in the ag tech space and what's going on there. Given the fact that I have my hand in a few different businesses across the supply chain, I really like to see what's happening there. And really, I don't do a whole lot of angel investing, but I like to sit and watch these pitches just to see what's coming about and what can we deploy capital towards. And so I get to watch a lot of pitches, and Katie's absolutely right. Like, there's a huge difference between farmers or somebody that has that subject matter building those startups compared to somebody that's like, hey, I'm an expert in the tech side and I'm going to come in and try to solve this problem that I think is a problem. Um, we were I always love this quote, and I think I've got it hanging up here somewhere, but Mark DeSantis, I think that's, yeah, Mark DeSantis from Bloomfield Robotics at the time. I think he's exited that company now. He said to us when we were down in Puerto Rico for American Farm Bureau, he said that you can get away with an associate's degree in the solution if you have a PhD in the problem. And I just it was just like a light bulb in my head. I'm like, you're absolutely right. If you know the problem well enough, you can align people. Here again, going back to that network, you can align the subject matter experts around you because you know that problem really well, and you know how to use those experts to build the tech that you need, or solve the problem of what we're dealing with in agriculture. And I think I would probably say that's probably true across other industries, but definitely for sure in agriculture.
Yeah, that's something that we really pride ourselves on as being farmers ourselves, and it's something that we've seen other companies build tools for farmers, and it doesn't matter if it's the direct to consumer farmer or the large commercial scale farmer. If they don't really understand even just understanding the way of life and the risks and the weather and it can be really hard for them. So
You don't understand, what that day to day is like, and it's like what's going through the guy that's making the decisions' mind on a day to day basis. And when you're trying to, deploy tech into agriculture, when you've got so many different variable problems coming at you on a daily basis, it's like you've got to really understand, what that farm manager, what that farmer, whatever is doing on a daily basis to understand how you can enter the market and actually solve the problem.
yeah,
Which,
yeah,
like
for
you
sure.
said, I mean, that's what we really sell ourselves on at Chop Locals, that we're farmers ourselves. We understand these problems that our vendors are facing. And we also understand, what our customers are facing as well, because we understand, there's really low access to highly local meats out in the market. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember now if I mentioned this earlier in this or not, but I didn't grow up on a farm. I didn't grow up with beef in my freezer. I'd never bought a quarter of beef, and so married into a farm family. And I know, like, the first time that we bought a quarter, it was so overwhelming for me. And I already knew which farmer to buy it from, and I knew that it was going to be really high quality, but I had no clue how to do the cut sheet. And there were a lot of cuts that I'd never cooked before, and just that's one of the reasons that we focus a little bit more on the retail cuts at Shop Local as well, is just to make it as simple as possible for that consumer. So, okay, a couple other Jared business beliefs. Do you think it is important to diversify your income and your risk? Or do you think that the negatives of that outweigh the pros?
I
He's
don't know.
thinking really hard for our
Not,
listeners. That pause was because he just sat back in his chair and he's thinking, he's like, I don't actually know what I believe about this right now.
yeah, I honestly go back and forth because it's really nice to be diversified. Here's how I'll lay it out. It's really nice to be diversified, and especially example of a time like now. When you're a row crop farmer and a livestock farmer, typically when you got low commodity prices on the row crop side, well, you're feeding that low commodity price to your livestock. Hopefully, livestock isn't low like it is now, and you're losing at both ends. But typically, it's not, and you're making a better margin on your livestock side. So you stay diversified that way. And that was kind of the mindset, for the last 20 years in agriculture is, they used to call pigs mortgage lifters, and help people get out of having all that debt on the land. Um,
And we should clarify that cattle's up right now. So when
Cattle
we
is up, yeah. Pork,
turkey's
chicken, and
not,
turkey's
turkey,
not,
pork,
not so
chicken.
much. So yeah, shout out to the beef guys. They're finally getting a break. They've had some rough years, so they're due for some good margins. But yeah, so on that hand, diversification is great. From from how do you really scale a business and be, probably grow your margin, and I don't want to say be successful because success shouldn't always be tied to money, but honestly, of money success, you really actually don't want to be diversified. In my opinion, you really need to hone in at what you're good at and do a lot of it and repeat it a lot. And that's really, you set up, you get good at something, you get that margin, and then you scale that thing. And so
But
that
if you're good at solving problems in businesses, you repeat that in various businesses.
you repeat that in various businesses, but where you run into the challenge, and where I've in time ran into challenges, is you've got to get the next layer of management to think that way too. So when you get yourself into a lot of different businesses, you've got to have probably each person leading that business have an entrepreneurial mind as well, and have a very solid business mind. And that's a challenge sometimes, especially in rural America. That's a challenge to find that next level leaders, in your organization, and you really need that. And you need to be able to manage those guys, and that's where some of the challenge comes in from being diversified. Me myself, if you're really honed in and focused on one tier of a business, you can escalate that thing. And it seems like whenever I move my attention to certain aspects of different businesses, it's like, oh, yep, we grow there. Well, then the other two maintain. And I just always, this is why I took such a big long pause, is because, while diversification is great, I'm one who I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, and I like to see things done properly in the right way that I, think they should be done to grow. And so it's always really hard when I take my mind off of another business to take my mind off of another business and help one tier grow. But so that's, yeah, I don't know. I'm all over on that question, but honestly, if you want to scale a business, need to get hyper focused on one aspect of that business that you're good at, and really exploit that and grow that business.
If scale is your goal.
If
Because
scale
we've
is your
also
goal, that's
talked
exactly
about
right. That's exactly right.
that, like, and you kind of mentioned it, big is not the only way to be successful in a
No, and
business.
that's exactly right, and that's why I always hate throwing out the word successful, because I've learned over the years success is not about money, and it's really what makes you happy at the end of the day, and you have good relationships, with who you're working with and whatnot. But so if scale is not not your shining star, not what you view success, that's not what your goal is in the next 5-10 years, then diversification is a great way to make a good steady living.
Yep. And I think Sonny Perdue made waves a few years ago by saying like get big or get out when he was Secretary of Ag. And that ruffled a lot of feathers. And I think especially for the businesses that we're working with, and you and I have discussed this too, is that like getting bigger is not necessarily their goal. You want to keep that direct relationship with people. That's the same way it is with ChopLocal. We could bring on a lot more vendors, but we want to keep a relationship with them, and we want to make sure that they are really high quality vendors that are providing an excellent experience for our customers. And so it's not kind of that growth at all costs, like we're just focused on bring on as many as possible, like some other companies. It's really because of the marketplace, it's about creating an experience that is really high quality. And I think that translates into some farms and even butcher shops and processing facilities. We're seeing that now too, where some of these small processors have tried to scale up or tried to grow bigger, and it just doesn't work the same way. It brings a new set of challenges that can be really hard to deal with. So,
I will say though, if you look at some of our vendors, and I also think it's important for them not to get too diversified. And here's a prime example. They need to figure out what they're good at within direct to consumer, because there's a lot of different ways you can be successful in direct to consumer. You've got the e-commerce portion, you've got the marketing portion, you've got the butcher shop, harvesting portion, you've got the growing portion, you've got genetics, you got how you're going to feed them nutrition. What are you good at? Pick 3 of those things. And I think Warren Buffett, there's a few people out there that always say you can only be good at 3 things in your life. And I believe that to 100%. But, pick 3 of those things and find somebody else to do the other ones. And that's where ChopLocal fits in to a certain extent for some of our farmers. They're really good, or butcher shops. They're really good at growing that animal, working at the nutrition, being out on that farm, making sure that animal's taken care of. And then the butcher shop, same way, doing a great job breaking down that animal, packaging, further processing into sticks, different ingredients, different recipes, all those things where they need help with the marketing side, the e-commerce portion. Don't try to be everything, because you're going to fail 100%. So
even at even a more micro level, as I'm doing these interviews for the podcast, like I know some of our farmers are really great at social media, but some of them are a lot better at email marketing. And
yep.
some of them do have some of them have one type of meat and that's it. And some of them have 6 or 7, they've got goat, lamb, beef, pork, like everything. But that's what works for them. And that's where they, like you said, be good at 1 or 2 or 3 things, or be good at being diversified, I think is a thing that you can be good at too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. All right, last one. I think you're going to agree on this one completely. Farmers do not value their time enough.
Not at all. There's a couple of examples of this, and it's I was just listening to a podcast about this from a agronomy side podcast I listened to. Well, it's Ag PhD. Listen to Ag PhD, and they were just talking about how their dad always told them you need to look at what brings you the most value per hour on your farm. And they were talking about spraying, tiling fields. There's probably people that I can debate about this with on in agriculture, but they're really talking about tiling. $300 an hour is what you can make. Spraying, you're up there $200 an hour. Whereas some of the other tasks that are maybe $5-10 an hour, you need to be pushing those off to other people to do, and you need to really focus on those higher dollar tasks. So that's one aspect in like row crop farming. You can see it plain as day. Farmers spending way too much time on tasks that they should hire out. To here again, going back to companies, trucking's one. Hire a good trucking company. They're way more efficient at trucking than you owning one semi truck. Now, if you want to scale up a trucking company and have 5-10 trucks, then it makes sense. But for our side of the business, what I've seen is farmers going out and delivering all their products when they can put it in the in the UPS for a fraction of the cost of what it costs them to drive around when they value their time and their mileage and all that for actually driving around and delivering the packages. So that's just one thing I see from people selling direct to consumer where you really got to sit down, open up that Excel spreadsheet or down on a notepad and say, okay, it took me 3 hours today to drive around and deliver these packages. What am I worth per hour? What do I want to make per hour? And write that down, and then see what that looks like compared to shipping out your package to those people. They may even be the next town. I mean, Katie knows I hate delivering packages because I like to be really efficient with my time. So, like Mondays and Tuesdays when I get orders, because I do have an online store on ChopLocal for turkey, and Mondays and Tuesdays I go in over my lunch break, from noon to 1, and that's my day to pack. Those are my 2 hours to pack out, and I was going 20 minutes to Mount Pleasant, which is just right down the road from me, but it was way more cost effective for my time to just get those packages packed, drop them off at the UPS pickup, and I'm done for the day.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the farmers valuing their time. I mean, that's like we know agriculture, farming is so time intensive, and like one of the best ways that you can make that lifestyle better is by reducing the amount of time that it takes, I think, so that you can just really focus on the parts that are so fulfilling, like I know
It's
people, some
it's
people really love to meet with their customers, and they might miss out on that by doing the deliveries. But there's other ways to do that too, where if you do one drop off in Mount Pleasant once a week, you could still get contact with your customers, without driving it to them all separately. Or, I'm just giving examples because that, Jared, for you guys wouldn't work necessarily, but that's one way that, you just have to start to start to really look at each piece of your business to see what's making the most sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing, Matt LaRue, our buddy Matt, who's kind of the meat pricing guru, we have a webinar from him on our YouTube channel, but he talks about with pricing, he really encourages farmers, even if you're going to different farmers markets, you might need to price differently based on how far away those farmers markets are and how much time it is taking you based on the distance. He's a big proponent of pricing differently for different channels in order to make sure that you are making money for your time, because that's so important.
Yeah, and I think you said farmers have a hard. It's a very time intensive job, and there's always something to do on a farm. That's old timers always say there's always something to be done. So if you want to take a break, you just got to close your eyes and take a break. But it's really hard to do as a farmer too. So many farmers are wired that we've always got to be busy. We've always got to be moving. If not, we're looked down upon. And I really hope that our generation starts to break some of that, because it causes some problems, I think, out, and it's caused a lot of problems in our workforce. And that we got to be at 24/7. Which, when you're taking care of livestock, there's things that you got to do all the time and all hours of the day. But we've got to do a better job of valuing that time and making sure that we do value what's most important, what we're good at. You brought up a prime example. If you like meeting with customers and that's what brings you enjoyment, you know what? Maybe that's your hour that's really your off a day, and so what that you wasted an hour to go meet with clients. You enjoy it, so.
Yeah. You almost opened up a whole nother can of worms that we're not going to cover, but you also, that I am a big proponent for mental health as well. And when you're
Yep.
talking about the farmer attitude of we have to be working all of the time, and we're going to expect that of our employees. Yeah, we want our employees to work hard too, but like we need to value downtime too. And I think that that is something in agriculture that we, going back to this, bigger isn't always better. Bigger isn't always the only way to be successful, is that there has to be a balance there. And we have to figure out how to make it work in a way that fulfills us personally too, because the mental health aspect of agriculture is just, I think it's reaching crisis levels now.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and especially when you're in a commodity based business, so it's always really easy to be like, we need to work harder. We got to work harder because that's the only way we're going to beat, our opponent and be the lowest cost producer or whatever it might be. And that's where I think direct to consumer is a really good. I mean, this ties right into Chop Local again, and it was something that I thought about when I started this is like not every farmer wants to be the 10,000 acre raise 20,000 head of hogs type farmer. Can we get back to where somebody can make a decent living on an 80, or something like that, not have to go into a massive amount of debt, not have to have the stress of all that, and but still be able to make a living, which has been a challenge in the last 20 years because that get bigger or go home mentality is definitely out there. And I think you're going to see people get bigger, but I think there's a huge opportunity for people to be niche and really really promote their brand to sell meat direct to consumer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was just thinking about like the the timing, the things that have happened in the last 5 years that have made direct to consumer so much more possible is really like I don't want to end on a pessimistic note talking about farmers' mental health, but like there's a lot of really, really great things happening in the direct to consumer world just with the number of people who are ordering their groceries online, and that's including meat now, allows you to open up and reach so many new customers. And when you can reach new customers and reach them with your story through social media and email marketing and these types of things, you can raise your prices. You're not locked into just competing with your local grocery store when you can reach those customers in the major cities. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to create Shop Local. Then we look at everything that's happening in the processing world. The number of processors who have become USDA inspected or CIS in some states that now these products can be shipped out of state. Again, you can reach so many more customers. And so, I mean, I truly hope that we are helping people fulfill that dream of making that direct to consumer, making that business work for them. So,
Well, I think certain farmers. I mean, it's back to what you're talking to. A lot of farmers like to meet their customers, and it just brings like you are making a product. If you're growing an animal, you're making a product, and if you're out here and you're selling to a packer, like it goes to the packer, and you don't know who your customer is. And luckily for us in the Westbury Foods Cooperative, the one nice thing that I think we've always had is like we know where our meat goes, like because we own the packer, and so like we know who our clients are, and we can say, yeah, that's might be my product in that store case or in that fast food or deli meat deli restaurant. And there's a lot of farmers that don't have that though, and that's where I think direct consumer brings some of that back to the industry. Is like I am selling my meat directly to this customer, and the one thing I love doing every time I see a review come through my email that gets posted on our website, like I love reading them because they're all very good, and it's like, yes, this is what it's about. Like that farmer gets that feeling of seeing that review of how great their product is because they work their ass off to produce that damn thing. So, you can look at that review here in probably a week from now when it's -5 out in Iowa and you're trying to break open ice waters for your cattle and go, you know what, this is why I'm doing it.
Exactly. And it's super fulfilling, super fulfilling. The reviews, and even, we watch the orders on the backside. So seeing the repeat orders come through and like, it's just, yeah, it is a great feeling. So.
Very rewarding.
Very rewarding. All right. Well, one of my favorite things to do is talk to people. So this has been very rewarding also, Jared. But you and I both have
probably not this one as much because we talk to each other all the time. So
yeah. But we got to hit on some of our favorite topics, like our story about how we got started with Chop Local, and we got to hit on a lot of your big business beliefs. Are there any others you thought I was going to ask you about?
No, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I've probably had a lot of them. That Katie knows this. I'm not one that gets stuck in my opinion as I have new experiences, and this might be a good belief for people to take up because I think there's a lot of people that are not like this. But like as you have more experiences in life, yeah, it's okay to change what you believe because you may have an experience that's like, okay, well that my initial belief wasn't right. I need to change to a new belief. And Katie's seen me, even when you asked me about, I forget which question it was, but, I was on the fence of, diversification. I've changed my belief on that a couple times because of my experiences. So,
And there's no like hard and fast rule for some of those. Some of those
yeah,
things I would,
you can pick. There's been people that have been successful in taking both routes in that, and it all goes back to. And I guess this is one belief that I've really came. It's not a belief. There's that understanding out. You need to understand, what makes you tick and why you do certain things, and like what you find what you find that brings you enjoyment. And I think for so long in my initial stage of being out in business, it was chasing money all the time, and it was like I valued every single thing about how it hit the profit and loss statement in my balance sheet, and that probably took me, or I would say it did take me down avenues that I wound up probably not as happy as I would have been if I stepped back and said, okay, what brings me value? And then let's surround myself with individuals and businesses that can do both. You can have growth, but also get fulfillment in life.
yeah, that's so huge. And yeah, I'm being very eloquent right now, aren't I? You can tell my 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 skill with words is coming through. No, but it's so true. And I also think like, we didn't tell the story about how the day that you filed the LLC for Chop Local was also the day that your third kid was born, right?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yep.
I'm just thinking about how, as you've gotten a little bit older, and I can say that because listeners, I am 5 years older than Jared. So, as you've gotten a little bit older, your kids have gotten older. Like, I think we're at that stage in our life where we're looking like time is just flying by. And so, like, what is it that we want to do that is really fulfilling? Because I've got a 16-year-old who's going to leave my house in a couple of years, and it won't be that long before your kids get
Yep.
that big. And like, I don't know.
No,
Maybe it's a
you're,
midlife, quarter life crisis. We're just starting to think about like what it looks
we always
like.
talk about, you talk about seasons, and I think
Yes.
it's you're in a different season, and you're exactly right. I mean, once I always tell people like, what's the most, or people ask, what's the most life changing event? It's having kids. My whole mindset changed once you had kids, and it's, getting married is one thing, but man, once you start having kids, your time constraints get bigger. I remember when Tanya and I were starting. My wife's a realtor. There was multiple nights when we got back from college that we were running hard. I was working on the farm. We'd get back at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and hell, we'd go to the bar and get something to eat and be home by midnight, and we'd get back up at 6 o'clock and start doing it again. You can't do that when you got kids, and you're kind of really constrained on time. So, yeah, you're exactly right. You're just in a different season, and your mindset changes, and you definitely really focus in on what's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so a couple things that I want to wrap up with here. First, that whole idea of seasons comes from Kendra Adachi. She has a podcast called The Lazy Genius. I just told Tanya she needs to read The Lazy Genius. I meant to send the book for Christmas, but I should do that. The Lazy Genius is probably, especially for women, probably the most life-changing book that I've ever read, that has helped me balance everything. I have 3 kids. I have Chop Local. I'm a business owner. I get it. So The Lazy Genius and the podcast, definitely listen to it. The second thing I was going to say is that if direct to consumer is your season and you need, one of the other Lazy Genius principles is let people in to help you. When you need help, let us in to help you. We really, Jared and I are both passionate about working with farmers and about creating new opportunities. And I know this gets really cheesy when I start talking about this, but like, that is truly what we want Chop Local to do. When we sit down and we're planning, yep, Chop Local needs to make money. Chop Local needs to be, a traditionally successful business, but we also talk about what are our personal skill sets and what are the parts of it that we really love that we want to continue to develop. And it's always about how do we add more value for our vendors and for farmers and butcher shops that aren't even our vendors. How can we do things like this podcast that give me incredible value and hopefully give you guys all of you listeners or viewers, give you value as well and help you grow your meat business. So This podcast, we've got a few more episodes planned in kind of this first trial season. We're going to interview some farmers and butcher shops from across the country. We've got one from Arizona, Michigan, Iowa, Ohio. I know I'm forgetting people, but a lot of different business models, different production methods, different tips and tricks in marketing that have worked really well for them. And these are all things that Jared and I, Sydney and Sierra have learned over the last 4.5 years of Chop Local. And we're really excited to now have this format where we can take all that information that we've learned and share it all with you via the podcast. You can also find our free resources and a couple of courses on meat marketing and shipping frozen meat at ChopLocalUniversity.com, and you can also find more information about becoming a Chop Local vendor there as well. All right, Jared, thanks for letting me go on that little monologue here, and thank you for taking time out. We're recording this right at the end of the year. Jared's got a lot of paperwork to do for all of these businesses, so thanks for taking the time to do the podcast.
No, thanks for having me on. I hope that you allow me to co-host this with you. Not all the time, but just maybe I'm like the guest co-host every once in a while. I'm terrible at asking questions though, so that might be kind of a problem. But
I thought about that. Now we're going to get on another tangent. I just did my whole wrap up, and
then we can cut this part if we need to. So,
well, I was just going to say what's really funny is Jared already mentioned how. Let's say outgoing I am. We'll use the word outgoing.
Yeah, that was a better way to describe it. This is why I hired Katie right here, is because she's really good with words and marketing and everything, and I kind of skirt around and get to the point.
Exactly. So when Jared and I have meetings, even if it's a business related meeting, a lot of times I end up talking all of the time because I just never let him get a word in edgewise. So that's what would happen if you co-hosted, Jared, is that you would
I'd
just
be like a weird person sitting in the corner.
Yes. You know what?
You get done and be like, why is this guy here?
Yeah. You can listen to all the episodes when they come out just like everybody else, okay?
Yeah, fine.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for you, and hopefully you got an idea of what we're all about and how we hope to help you in the future.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to ChopLocalUniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.